frankly speaking, awaiting the sign off of COFAP to move forward. Things that, to be truthful, if we're going to be absolutely frank, a lot of these things are being dictated by the very IDP communities that a lot of the countries, the programs are being driven through. But we, for example, deposit insurance, the credit reporting facility, the securities legislation, all of those things are absolutely important, but yet still we can't seem to get COFAP to meet. What is the disconnect? That's the question I have. What is the issue? Help me.
In relation to COFAP, hopefully the way Jamaica is organizing, or CARICOM organizing with Jamaica, for the COFAP meeting to take place the day before the heads. Because a lot of heads are ministers of finance. And I think that would help. The other thing in relation to several of these countries, and certainly the OECS, you take, for instance, securities legislation. The OECS countries have securities legislation. They have a central bank, they operate, they have a platform. And they try to make arrangements between the platform in the OECS and the platform with Jamaica and the platform with Trinidad. And maybe people don't see that as something so urgent.
Okay.
But then, and there are a few others. You take the issue of credit reporting. We just passed in all our countries credit reporting legislation and set up credit reporting systems. Because in the case of our monetary union, we consider it something of great importance, and so on and so forth. So I think there's some things like that where persons feel that they're going to do a duplication without it necessarily being a great add-on, and so on. In some cases, mistakenly, but those are some of the issues. But I just want, because I know the trade union movement is here and they will talk about even the issues related to the 10 categories.
Oh.
What happens is this. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we do a lot of CARICOM Skills National Certificates. And the UWI students from other countries come to us and satisfy the requisites, and we sign on. We give opens write the signatures like doctors, medical doctors. You can't write it, it's a scroll. I write it out Ralph E. Gonzalez, so you gotta read it plain, and everybody, every immigration officer, everybody who comes, know I have a very big mouth, and if they turn away somebody, and they turn them away and I talk about it. So we have to use also the media to help to do some of these things. But the games which some countries play, I don't find the problem well, it's not relevant in the OECS. But the main culprits in this regard are Jamaica, in Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago. They twist every single CARICOM Skills National Certificate upside down, inside out, as though they're written in Mandarin Chinese upside down. You know, and some refuse to accept them, as Bruce says. So that this is an area where, that's why those things, I'm talking about practical things in the existing things, the arrangements for our single market and functional cooperation, we can get done, which would make life better for people. And we can't jump over them. And we can't lay back our back. I was thinking that when Justin was talking about, he observes the he observes the Olympics and how the high jumper put his back backward. All I will add him and the CDB to do is to read a very interesting monograph by Lenin, V.I. Lenin. I don't know if they do that in CDB.
Lenin.
Call one step backward, two step forward.
Oh.
They never brought you up. They never taught you that one in school. You should read it. It will help you a great deal because it's a more profound elaboration of the principle than the analogy from long jumping.
Okay. I was to take our first question from our first statement from the floor. Go ahead. Could I just ask you to identify yourself so we know exactly? Let's press it right. But
yes, my name is Jack Menkel. I'm from the Antonicum University of Suriname. So I had, amidst of the skepticism of some people about the CSME, I think Mr. Ralph Gonsalves made a very interesting statement of leadership. And he said leaders make history, referring to the 18th mayor of Napoleon. So, but only in the context of circumstances. So my question is, what type of leadership, in terms of the profile and dynamics, in this context of history, we need at the level of the CARICOM, as an institution, and the leadership in the member countries?
okay.
I would say that
No,
what the leader has to do is to push the limits of the existing possibilities. They make history only to the extent that the circumstances of history permit them so to make. So you push to the limits the possibilities of those circumstances. That's the area where, that's what I'm arguing. Not to ask the leader to do something where it's not a question of pushing the limits of what is possible. Is when you're asking the leader to do something which in the circumstances simply cannot be done. And there are many possibilities in the functional cooperation aspects, the 3 areas plus the single market area. And I've been identifying some of them. And they're identified in your booklet, the circulation, where we can do very useful work for the people. But those limits of those possibilities are not being sufficiently tested, and we are not doing those things which can be done, which are available to be done. Which is a different way to pose the question than what my brother posed earlier. If we come back to the same conundrum, really.
All right. Next, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I am Simone Bettinayo, CSME focal point for Jamaica. Actually came as an observer because I also wanted to hear more from some of our non-state actors. I think we, as the technocrats, we speak a lot in the CSME institutions on this issue, and sometimes it's also good to be in listening mode. But notwithstanding that, my comment, of course, or my question is without prejudice to my own government's position on this. But I thought that I should raise the issue of a supranational authority. I think we have broached the subject. But perhaps for the benefit of this consultation, it would be useful if we can elaborate a little bit on it, on this issue. And perhaps the answer lies in exactly that very issue, based on the questions that have been raised about implementation deficit and the need for an authority to sort of assist the region in its implementation efforts. We have undertaken an elaborate exercise on the single jurisdiction to create a more enabling environment for businesses. And in that policy framework document, there is that very same proposal that the region would need to change its governance structure for a a single jurisdiction, which is a single legal space to support businesses and to allow businesses to thrive and to become more competitive in the region to respond to some of these global challenges. And there, the issue of governance has come back in the discourse on how to make the CSME more effective and to respond to the challenges and to seize the opportunities of the 21st century. So is it that we're skirting the issue? The issue is we need an authority to perhaps initiate infringement proceedings, similar to the European Commission. Isn't that where perhaps the answer lies? Otherwise, we run the risk of revisiting this issue 10 years later. I just thought that based on what has been raised by our distinguished panelists, that maybe we need to examine the issue of the role that a supranational authority similar to the Commission could play in helping or seeking to ensure that we implement as we had intended. Thank you.
I would like to say something, and then I'd like to hear Bruce on it, because Bruce and I had been involved in this. At a later stage, after 2007, when he came to the table in September 2007, there is a very important supranational authority. It's called the Caribbean Court of Justice. It's the only supranational authority with enforcement powers in CARICOM, in the Caribbean community. And it applies community law. Community law consists of 3 bundles. First, the revised treaty. Secondly, the decisions of the heads. And thirdly, decisions of the CCJ itself in its original jurisdiction. Those are the 3 sources of community law. And where community rights are involved, the community law takes precedence to quote-unquote national law. The whole series of decisions from the CCJ elucidate those fundamental points. Individuals can go to the CCJ in relation to any presumed breach, any alleged breach of their rights. Companies can go, and so do governments. Governments do not go, at least none has gone thus far, because we still believe in settling these things in the old network system, talking to one another and hoping to get it done. But it's open to governments too. So that's the first important supranational body. And there are many decisions which touch and concern businesses which you can go to the CCJ about. So that's one. I mean, simple one. Let's take, there's this thing where in St. Vincent, a group of persons, they're in some Christians organizations, and didn't want Mavado to come to St. Vincent. Somebody whom I've been advised is involved in activities between Gaza and Gully in Jamaica. And they felt that his songs were too risky and all kind of different things and so on, and something violent and the like of it. And the commissioner came to me and said that he's recommending that they be banned, that he be banned. So I said, but you haven't read Shanik Myrie? He said, but the churches are saying so. I said, but we are not run by any Christian group or any Christian Taliban group. We are run by the law. And what you must do is to say yes, tell the churches yes. But you can tell Mr. Brooks, which is his real name, that, and the producer of the show, that the police force has listened to these songs, and they said you can't sing. If you sing those, you're likely to be arrested, not necessarily at the show, but after, offending the criminal laws of the country. In other words, you can come in and you can sing all the uplifting ones you want to sing. But you can't sing the ones which create issues of public disorder and public indecency and so on. And Mavado came, he sang. I even went to the show of Mr. Brooks. and the only thing there that I observed, they were beautiful songs. In fact, I took one of my daughters, and the only thing which happened there, which was nominally illegal, was there was a lot of weed which was being smoked in the Victoria Park. So, and the police rightly didn't bother to lock up anybody for smoking a spliff or two. And everybody enjoyed themselves, and the Christians and so on. So that there are, I'm only amplifying what exists, that's one. Then, there are some things where you need a central mechanism to direct. And I've been arguing that we should have that in relation to economic integration issues. And from my perspective, the single market issues, which is where we are at. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen. And if you permit me just this moment to explain this. In 2003, and you can look in the history, there was a beautiful declaration in Montego Bay called the Rose Hall Declaration. You should remember this. And then CARICOM decided to set up a Prime Ministerial Subcommittee on Governance, and I was asked to head it. Included on that committee were the good and great of CARICOM. P.J. Patterson was there. Jack Dew was there. I apologize if anybody in Guyana don't think that Jack Dew is good and great, but I'm putting everybody in the same mix. Owen Arthur was there. Patrick Mannion was there. There were 3 subcommittees, technical committees, one headed by Ramphal, so she that on governance issues, Simpliciter, one by the president of the CDB on the financing of CARICOM, and the third one by Professor Dennis Ben on parliamentary oversight of CSME issues, the Association of Caribbean Community Parliamentarians. We produced beautiful reports, and I thought we were getting somewhere. And then some leaders had cold feet, including some who on the committee said that the last minute they think that it would offend cabinet sanctity. It's important, but this is an issue which would recur. And they came up at the CARICOM heads of government on a brilliant idea to submit the recommendations of the Prime Ministerial Subcommittee and these technical committees to a further review by a review body headed by Vaughan Lewis, Professor Lewis. Well, that was just kicking the can down the road. At that moment, only the funeral rites remained to be performed, because Vaughan Lewis presented his report and it just went into the clouds. So you may forgive me if I tell you that from what I've experienced across these 17 years, we're not going to have this. Now Bruce Golden entered the picture. And Bruce said, yes, but we should do something when he was chair, and he was pushing it. And he came up with the idea of CARICOM ambassadors, a committee of CARICOM ambassadors, and to put some other systems in place. But within a couple of years, Bruce must have realized that they knocked the shine off his ball. And he left without even the limited mechanisms which he's talking about. And some of them he has rehearsed in his paper, in his report. We are not anywhere near to those. So you ask me, I give you, and I'm not pessimistic. I am just realistic, and I would like to join again to try to see if we can have a crack at this. And I will hope I can get a crack at it before I demit this office. I intend to demit. In fact, I want to demit. I don't think the electorate intends to retire me. But I, of my own volition, would wish to demit. But I would wish before demitting that I can get another crack at this to see if we can get something in place, Bruce. Even to do some of the things, some of the halfway house ones now. But if you say to me that, ask me if I'm optimistic, my answer, as presently advised, would be no. I'm not optimistic. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't try. But not the full heart of a European type commission. It ain't gonna happen.
Mr. Golden, you have to say?
Just briefly. Ralph gave me the history of the contemplation. I'm told, I wasn't there in 2003, but I'm told that when the idea was floated, it had the support of only 2 or 3 heads. There are others who were either opposed or who had serious reservations. Have to be careful that we don't try to get the cart to pull the horse. If CARICOM governments and CARICOM heads are not prepared to proceed with implementation of matters on which they all agree, I'm not sure what the likelihood of some supranational authority, however its authority is defined and clothed, is going to get them to do things that they don't want to do. We have a supranational authority, as Ralph has pointed out, in the CCJ. But we have to be careful that we don't use that as an analogy for executive authority, because your judicial system is supposed to be beyond the reach of political control. And that is why we function in the Caribbean, either with the CCJ, over which we have no control, or the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, over which we have no control. But there are serious political and constitutional issues that arise if a body of persons will now be able to take effective decisions affecting people in a sovereign state who are not accountable to the people of that sovereign state. I mean, that's a serious constitutional issue that I would have a difficulty as Prime Minister, for example, explaining to the voters of my country why we allowed this matter to proceed on the basis of a decision made by a group of persons sitting somewhere in the Caribbean. And when the voters ask me, what do you plan to do about it, I would be stumped. So there are serious issues there. And let me tell you something. If we can't even get to the stage of allowing smooth operation of the free entry of 10 categories of skilled workers, it suggests a deeper malady than anything that can be fixed by some supranational authority. Unless you're going to go to the whole house, unless you're going to go talk about a political union, which is putting the matter even to further absurdity. Even in the United Kingdom, where they have, in the EU, where they have a political superstructure, they have difficulty. This business of CARICOM and everything else that is appended to it, CSME, you name it, is going to depend on the extent to which the leaders of CARICOM forget now about the vision and that kind of, that's important, but forget about that for the moment. the extent to which the government and the leaders of CARICOM see value and benefit in acting in concert. If they don't see that, mechanisms not going to make it work. I mean, the matter of foreign policy coordination has, and I'm going to use a strong word, collapsed so badly that, I mean, just this week I'm reading in the papers back home that Jamaica and St. Kitts and Nevis are vying for a position at UNESCO. Vying. I mean, we had agreed some long time ago that when it comes to international position, we caucus among ourselves. And we would say, all right, St. Kitts, you go, we back you. Or Jamaica, you go, we back you. But we are in Paris, on the world stage, Jamaica and St. Kitts and Nevis fighting over one position at UNESCO. Something is seriously wrong. Seriously wrong. SG, I don't know what the agenda for the heads of government meeting in July, which will be held back home. I don't know what the agenda is. But my humble suggestion to you would be to tear it up. Your agenda needs one item on it. One social item. And if you dare ask me to help you, I'm available.
You know, the former talk show host in me is just begging to ask, so what is the item? Yes. Taking two more questions and then we have to wrap this session.
Thank you, sir. Do I go or is it someone first? Someone before me?
No, go ahead.
My name is Thomas Singh. I'm at the University of Guyana. I want to say that the presentations this morning by Prime Minister Gonzalez and Mr. Golding, especially useful, important, as I'm sure we all agree. The jury is clearly out on the benefits. I don't agree with Dr. Ram that we just talk about the benefits and have it percolate down, because the jury is out on the benefits of CARICOM, of CSME rather, as we've heard. The context, that global context, is a bit missing, however. It might actually ratify what's been said before, but the global context is one in which there was Brexit. And now, as you might have heard from the news today, even in the Group of Seven, President Trump is doing his own thing. And there's great distrust. And allies, or former allies, no longer know who they are even. So there's a global context that is challenging what we might assume. And I think the presentations by Prime Minister Gonzalez and Mr. Goldman this morning underscored that we have to discuss the benefits of CSME. What has been the impact? I want to urge that there should be a well-designed study of the impact of CSME, an empirical one, that would assist us to think about exactly what we've achieved. Secondly, so that's my recommendation, number one. Number two, I want to say that we're assuming that the architecture of the CSME that was set, what was it, more than 2 decades ago, is the very one that we must carry into the future. And I don't think we can make that assumption, because we've got countries pursuing different exchange rate policies, for example. No country, it's not a malady, no country wants to cede its fiscal independence easily. You know, these are serious issues. And of course, you know, there's a political process. A prime minister is elected by an electorate, has to respond to those people before thinking about responding to larger regional commitments. So for me, it's not a malady. It is an issue. It is a real issue to do with a conflict of interests. For that reason, I want to suggest that original architecture that was created for the CSME doesn't have to be the one that we take forward into the future. Might be that some things have to change. And finally, I'd like to say that regarding the CCJ, as a Guyanese, I'm convinced that it is just another legal institution that depends critically on the judiciary, their particular interpretation, broad and narrow. And that sometimes what might be acceptable or convincing in law might not make sense outside of the law. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. I do that.
There are two things, you said a lot. There are two things I will answer very quickly. My experience with the law follows Aristotle's precept that the law is right reason. Occasionally, of course, the law is an ass. But the fact of the matter is this, is the only institution which we have to authoritatively determine, so that we take that as it is. The second one is that the interests of the people on the ground in your constituency as a political, as a parliamentary representative ought to coincide with the interests of the region. At times they may diverge, but if over the whole they diverge so completely contrary to the interests of your constituents, it means that it's a design which is not appropriate at all. You're not going to have every issue where the local or even the national gets the yes answer to positively. But on balance, at the end of the day, you come to the conclusion that the whole is greater than the summation of the individual parts. And though you may not advance at quite the same pace as another entity in the integration process, that you advance relative to where you were before. And that basically is the thesis adumbrated years ago, Bruce, when we read the book by Brewster and Thomas, The Dynamics of Regional Integration. And that is always the balance which has to take place on an ongoing basis. And it has been so since 1968, when that book was first written. It's only that it's now in different, and there are multiple things now because of the way the treaty is constructed. So I don't worry about that. I have to balance on an ongoing basis different sets of interests which are articulated by different groups of constituents, and I have to take one side or the other in a particular policy outcome. But what you seek to do is over the whole, that you have policy outcomes beneficial to everybody. The danger though, increasingly in our region, is that I don't know where the source, what this comes from, that an increasing number of people, despite the improvement in their livelihoods, live in a permanent condition of dissatisfaction. Well, if you live in a permanent condition of dissatisfaction, I can't help you. You have to go to the Lord in prayer.
All right. You want to say? Last question. Just remind you to identify yourselves, please.
Yes, David Underhill is my name. Just two quick questions to Prime Minister and former Prime Minister. Do we have a problem of crisis management with respect to governments, given all of the major challenges of fiscal deficits and so on and so on and so on, and resource constraints? And is there time and energy being paid in the context of crisis management to matters that are outside of
the immediate day-to-day running of countries. Is that a problem? And the second related question is, are we not also, in terms of the CSME, does that not reflect a more general crisis of the institutions of post-independence states, and our post-independence institutions really are in a state of crisis? So let me just take the Trinidad and Tobago example, where in the last 5 years, we can't appoint a commissioner of police in 5 years. And that is just one of the criminal justice system where the High Court dispenses with 20 or 25 murder cases a year, but there are 500 people awaiting trial in the context where only 10% of murders result in someone getting to the High Court on trial. So if every murderer was brought to the High Court through indictment, there will be a backlog of count the number of years before you address that. Those are two examples of the crisis of our post-independence institutions. And does that not contribute to the failure of the CSME as well?
All right. Where was it?
Well, you know, David, we need a whole seminar on those questions. Because, look, several countries in the region have constructed in the post-independence period, and I'm not calling the name of any country, a socio-economic model grounded in social democracy. And tremendous advances have been made in the lives of ordinary people by successive governments. And despite disagreements between this government and that government, they have all contributed to adding to this. Whether they are right of center, left of center, but they basically came from the social democratic stable. And then the worst global economic crisis comes along from 2007, 2008 and continuing. And then disasters strike, natural disasters. And that model, which would have been able to withstand maybe 1 year or 2 years of such a crisis and its consequences. But when you go for 10 years, and you're hoping to amend it as you go along, but then it turns out that you need to take a completely fresh guard. Some of these things have arisen because of the workings of the economy and our natural circumstances, and they drive people into all kinds of different decisions. So some countries, to find an immediate answer with the fiscal problems, you have to sell your passport and you sell your citizenship. Others, you have to go to the IMF. There are all kinds of different things that happen. In the case of some, the oil bonanza is not there as much as before, and foreign exchange is rationed, and difficulties arise because a model had been constructed which the circumstances of the crisis as such, the total crisis arising from the global economic situation, climate change and the like, a number of things, and you have to redesign. This is the reality. And maybe part of the redesign, you have to take one step backward and to take two forward. You have to take a fresh guard, however, and to talk to the population in a manner and ask them to come along with you in this redesign of that model which has grown up since independence and what has happened in the new circumstance. So that's, and our population don't want to hear about a different kind of a possible design. And we are going to see with great interest how many of them are going to turn out. We are living them, you know. Jamaica with the IMF and what has happened subsequently, Barbados now with the IMF, Trinidad with its own kind of approach, the various islands in the Eastern Caribbean, which had aspired to the Barbados model, had to take some fresh guard. Some haven't even taken the fresh guard. And by the way, the issues you and I talking about, nobody in the university addressing these questions, you know. Look, 20% of St. Vincent and the Grenadines debt, 20%, 1/5, currently, is to deal with climate change issues, disasters and the like. And we haven't had big hurricanes, we have had storms. No, that's a big number, a very big number. I've lost the preferences in the banana industry. I said in 1993, we sold $120 million worth of bananas to the United Kingdom. Today we sell 0. We sell some to Trinidad, but can't get the foreign exchange. You see the point I'm making? Then since 2010 to now, is 35% of the GDP in loss and damage caused by natural disasters, and 17% liability, 17% of GDP liabilities in relation to in relation to CLICO and BICO. And then I have corresponding banking relations problems, even though I don't sell passports and citizenship, because all of we inside of the same boat, etc., etc. The challenges which we are facing must be spelled out to our people, but at the same time we must say to them, what are some of the things which we are doing? Like for instance, I believe that I'm going to make, St. Vincent and the Grenadines is going to make far more money from medical marijuana than from selling passports. And I'm proceeding with that. Of course, I have problems. How am I going to bank the money? Because the federal government still, it's a criminal offense.
Yes, it is.
They haven't. So Jamaica has that problem. Jamaica has redesigned theirs in a way. I'm trying to design it a little differently. Learn from, because Jamaica 2 years now with ganja, with medical marijuana, they haven't exported 1 ounce yet. And there must be a problem in the design because this hasn't happened. So there's tourism, there are all kind of other things, there are cultural industries. And every time, in the case of Barbados lost $2.5 billion in revenue over 10 years, $250 million a year, because of the changes in the international regulations regarding international businesses. These are objective facts which we have to deal with. Ain't got nothing to do with frontally, ain't got nothing to do with me. Different people may respond differently to the challenge, but I'm talking about objective problems which exist. I'm giving this litany not for lamentations, but for fresh guard to be taken and to involve the population. And we're talking a lot about what governments can do. We are not talking about what people can do. You cannot build a progressive, sustainable society on leisure, pleasure, and nice time. And there is an overwhelming thirst among a large section of our people for leisure, pleasure, and nice time, which somebody have to finance, and some people don't want to work to produce. So this is an issue which we have to address. That hasn't come up yet, but I'm sure it will come up, and that the trade unions would raise it, because it is a matter which is in their interest to raise. Insofar as this crime is concerned, the point you raise is absolutely important. The way in which the legal systems have been devised, and you can't deal with the number of cases, because the courts are still wedded to an old-fashioned approach of benefiting lawyers. A lot of people don't want me to say that. I'm a lawyer for several decades now. Adjournments, but a lot of the adjournments waiting on fees, and so on and so on and so forth, and relationship with police and all. Bruce talked about a malady. Our redesign has to take place not only with policies and institutions, but a shift in our people's mindset. Please, let me illustrate. Now we are having a season of graduations. This amazing American phenomenon, this cultural imperialist phenomenon has grabbed us. Children before they're 5 years old who are leaving preschool have a graduation mortarboard and everything else.
True.
It's very expensive.
True.
And everybody wants a trophy.
True.
The trophies are within 2 weeks. When the sea breeze hit them, the brass turns, you got to throw them away. But it is important for a photograph to be taken with the mother, and you put it on social media. And see how many likes you have. You know, so it's a show. Primary school, the same thing. If I say, listen, you live in primary school, I will buy you some notebooks, some books, and geometry sets. Yeah, comrade. But I want the teacher tell you I want a big trophy for the one who come first. And then this amazing thing now, that when an American phenomenon again, when you are dead, you have to have a feast afterwards, and a burial costs twice, 3 times, because everybody wants to come and eat food and drink rum over the dead. I mean, we have to speak on these things, because these things are taking a lot of resources. We used to have a traditional thing of 9 night and 40 night connected to the Bible, and people will cook in the area, and you'll have some cocoa tea and so on and so forth. No, it's an entirely different story. It has gone. So all of these debilitating American habits are coming because everybody is worshiping neoliberalism from the United States. The CNN, Fox, everybody. I mean, I don't know. Barrow, Manley, Burnham, and Williams will be turning in their graves if they see how we have allowed our leaderships have not spoken out about these things. We must not be afraid of the people. We must love them and work in communion with them and to provide leadership. I have tried to do so. They think I'm just an idiosyncratic fella. We have Carnival in St. Vincent coming up. The mass bands are made in Beijing. Beads, feathers, and bikinis. No longer any creativity. It's just bacchanalia with no culture, and so on and so forth. Please forgive me, my brother, because you scratch a surface there with me with some of these things, which
Clearly.
which just give me an opportunity. But I talk about all these things at home, you know. Some of my own supporters laugh. They say, well, you know, that is the comrade. But I have to talk about them because they touch real life, living production and reproduction.
All right. Thank you for that, Prime Minister. Even though, as you spoke to that, I still couldn't get past you at the Mavado concert.
I was the oldest man at the Mavado concert.
You know the call man has been declared a ballhead Rasta in Jamaica.
All right, as we're going to wrap up this session, I don't know if Mr. Golden had anything you want to say, wrap up in a minute or so, and I extend the same courtesy to...
Yes. And it's based on an observation that was made in the report of the Review Commission in Jamaica. We have tended to rely too much for the energy and commitment towards regional integration. I think we have tended to rely too much on our common history and heritage and our shared past. It's not appreciated in terms of everyday life to the same extent right throughout the region. Do you find that there's much more interpersonal relationship among people in the Eastern Caribbean than there are between the Eastern Caribbean and, say, we up in the Northwest? I had an experience some years ago, 2010, when I hosted the CARICOM Heads of Government meeting back home. And we were talking about the fact that to too great an extent we don't know each other. And I had all the heads of government to breakfast. And there were 6 waiters in the room serving us. And I called them over and I asked each of them, do you know anybody in St. Kitts? No, sir. You know anybody in Barbados? No, sir. You know anybody in Trinidad? No, sir. Not one of them knew anybody in any of the other Caribbean countries. So I think that we have kind of beaten a broken drum when we try to use that as this kind of emotive underpinning of the integration process. As we said in the report, it is not our shared path that is going to drive us forward. It is the perception that we have a shared future, that there are benefits that can flow from our holding hands and facing that future together. But I suggest in all humility that that is a case that has not yet been made. If the leaders themselves have doubt about that shared future, can you imagine what is happening in the minds of the people? The day that we are able to show them in real, tangible ways, even if we do it on a pilot project basis, the day that we can show them in real, meaningful, tangible ways that, look, here is what Caribbean integration could mean. Here is what single market and economy could mean to you and your everyday life and your challenges. If we were ever able to do that, the leaders would not lead them. The leaders would have to be running fast to try and catch up with them. In the same way that Higglers have found themselves in St. Vincent and Grenada and pursuing their own dreams and their own hopes. But where we have a job as leaders is that we have to configure it and demonstrate to them that, look, this is where you can make 2 blades of grass grow where only 1 grass grew before. Or this is where you can make 10 mangoes come off the tree whereas you're only able to get 1 before. Until we can make that case to them, the excitement that we're going to need to drive it forward is not going to be there.
All right. Thank you. Prime Minister Gonzalez, do you have any last word you want to add?
No, just, I wouldn't be here this afternoon, but I want all of us who are here to be evangelists for the deepest integration which is possible in all the circumstances, and to work towards it, because without it, we are going to have more difficulties by ourselves. But taking into account that some of the old modes which we have articulated, we have to interrogate them in order to get the most optimal regional integration apparatus to benefit our people. It is not a question for us to duck from regional integration, but to embrace it, rethink it, and to do practical things which are going to better the lives of our people, which is what the integration movement is about. Thanks.
And with that, Prime Minister, I really don't think there's anything that I could say to add to that. So what's left for me to do is really thank both Prime Minister Azaz and former Prime Minister Golden, Justin Ram, and of course Najo SG, who has sat through the proceedings at the table. And thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for your engagement. I turn it back over to the chair of the proceedings so he can guide us as to the next steps. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ASG. Really fruitful discussion. And going forward this afternoon and tomorrow, we won't have that much liberty with our time, as we have to be on point. Quick announcement for those of you who are funded. Right after we have finished, you are asked to go by the secretariat. That's the room next to the elevator. Make sure that you present your boarding pass so that we can sort out your per diem. Common sense dictates that the next panel we were supposed to have this session really cannot take place. So I suggest that we break for lunch and we come back at 2:15. I hand you over to Ambassador Humphrey, and we have that panel dealing with find it, I should know it out of my head. Can the CSME as currently configured sufficiently support sustainable growth and development? An examination of what the CSME objectives and priority measures should be. And I think one question that was raised this morning, about half an hour ago, could segue into that panel discussion in terms of your thoughts, I think, distinguished delegate, on if the architecture that we had put in place some 20 years ago for the CSME, if it's still relevant at this time. Rather than speaking about it, the real rationale for this exercise was to get from you some of those very same recommendations in that regard. So I think this afternoon you can come back with some of the ideas, and I would charge the moderator for that session, that is Ambassador Huntley, to address very quickly. We have on that panel, so we don't go back to introducing again, I think Desiree Field Ridley. She'll be doing the overarching context. Who else do I have? Mr. Marlon Tecklin and Dr. Thomas Samuel, and moderated by Ambassador Earl Humphrey from Barbados. So 2:15, be back here on time so we can try with some tightness. Ambassador Humphrey, 101 40 minutes for the first panel so we can finish in good time and get to our places. Those of you who are funded, please check the secretariat, that building at the closest. I'm tired, SG. That room closest to the elevator. Thank you very much. See you back at 2:15. Thanks again, panel.